news. Tickets for the Conference on Religious Trauma, Court 2023, are now available. Also, if you're interested in an ad-free version of the Divorcing Religion podcast, come join me over on Patreon. Links for both are in the show notes. Thanks. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Divorcing Religion podcast. I'm your host, Janice Selby. I'm a registered professional counselor and a religious recovery consultant. Some of you will recognize my guest today right away from the names Dear Mr. Atheist and Mr. Atheist. And I asked him specifically how he would like to be introduced on the Divorcing Religion podcast. And here's what he said. Jimmy Snow is the executive producer of The Line. He also makes ergonomic work-from-home furniture for ferrets. So welcome.
Right. Did I forget to mention that wood? It's wooden furniture. I'm a woodworker.
Wow. Yes. So we have to be specific because ferrets, they know what they want. You want to give them what they want.
And you have to seal the wood special. Otherwise, they just chew it up. It's a lot of work is all I'm saying.
We have a similar problem here with beavers in Canada for those who are making work from home beaver furniture.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. Though I saw a study recently they did or an experiment they did recently where they could stimulate that urge by just playing the sound of trickling water. So I wonder if the opposite would happen if you would isolate it from some sort. Anyway, this is not what the podcast is about, but.
That is a very interesting idea, however.
Yeah.
And so thanks for joining me today. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me. And I know a lot of people already are informed about you and what you're doing, and we'll talk about that just a little bit later. I was hoping that you would share with us some of what it was like to grow up in the religious background that you grew up in, what it was like for you, and why you left or how you left.
Yeah, it's interesting. So first, because I know my own self and the way in which I tell stories, I should ask at the top, on your program, do you avoid swearing, or is that not a problem?
Swear away, my friend.
Okay. I grew up Mormon, and the swearing was a hard no. So you couldn't swear in Mormonism. What it was like growing up Mormon. So there is a diversity of experiences from people who grow up Mormon, but there's also some commonality. And so there's a nice thing where when you're talking about your experience, there's going to be things you recognize of each other. And then there are things that you're aware of that other families will have done. Because within Mormonism, you have Mormonism, which is like cult prime. That's your main cult. That's the main one that you subscribe to. And I definitely, for anybody who's listening and wondering, not only do I defend that Mormonism is and was a cult, you can actually find, if I've got it back up since I've been fixing the hack, but it'll be up soon if it's not. But I did a series with Telltale actually breaking down the bite model
Nice.
and why Mormonism is a cult. But so you have cult prime, you have the main one, and then you have subcults within Mormonism. And usually the second cult is your family. And there's this sort of the father is the patriarch, and he is the one who's going to give you the instruction and the direction. Now, basically, how authoritarian that patriarch is where you're going to see the biggest variance between people's different experiences of the church. My father was extremely authoritarian. It's not. I wouldn't say the majority of people have a more authoritarian family than the church itself. It's usually either matched or maybe even a little bit less. Whereas ours was the opposite. It was extreme authoritarian. I'm so sorry that you probably just heard a notification sound. I will fix that. It won't happen again now. Okay. Extremely authoritarian. And the way in which it worked in my family was your value was assessed in accordance to how well you were living the personality which had been prescribed for you by that father, how much you are doing what he thought is valuable, what he thought is good. And all of that has to do with Mormonism. Now, there was also levels of conflict and stuff that was separate from Mormonism, but also I had a terrible family. My family is really big. I have 12 siblings, about half are adopted, half are biological. And it was a really not harmonious home. A lot of that is more of from the, it's the different roles of parents, that a lot of the conflict was more instigated by my mother than my father, but my father being on the authoritarian religious side and she being more of the instigator side. It's just a very negative and toxic place to grow up. However, you never, ever broadcasted that outward. So no matter how many fistfights were happening, screaming was happening, I hate you, whatever, all of that stuff. Yeah. When you're at church or when you're in front of other people, you are the Mormon family, like the good beacon Mormon family. And so it's been interesting now in talking to people from that childhood that you're asking about, who had a totally different conception of our family, and were surprised that I left, thinking that I left like such a supportive family and such a loving family. No, not at all. Not only is it not a supportive family, I'm not sure my parents ever learned how to love their children, let alone, yeah. Anyway, so my experience growing up in Mormonism was a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, a lot of authoritarian commands, a lot of inability to live up to a lot of those because of being both a person with a high sex drive and am autistic and am queer, though that was easier to suppress because I am still very interested in women and was able to feel satisfied, not at that time anyway, not exploring sort of the other sides of my sexuality. And so basically everything I'm describing is a recipe for living a totally non-authentic life, only receiving validation when you are either helping convert somebody to Mormonism or you are demonstrating a type of religious charisma, which is why I say the whole reason I'm charismatic now and able to do YouTube and shows and all that sort of stuff is it was a skill I learned to survive in Mormonism, because as a man, you're only valued in Mormonism if you're charismatic. And then from there, it's basically a recipe for suicidal ideation. It's you do not get to be yourself, and you spend your evenings, as soon as you hit isolation, your isolation just consists of grieving essentially over how much of yourself you're killing all the time. And so that's how I would describe it. A very abusive home life, a very abusive religious life. And without Mormonism, everything could have been much different. And so the thing that I'm most bitter about is growing up Mormon, that it stole my family from me. So that's like the one, the like, if you'd asked me to answer your question in a single sentence instead of like the 9 or 10 minutes I've taken so far, whatever it's been, it would have just been my experience of growing up Mormonism is it steals your family and your personality from you.
And so how old were you when you started questioning about Mormonism and whether or not it was real?
So the funny thing is when I started questioning isn't as interesting as just when I started rebelling. Because the rebellion is what probably ultimately led to my ability to question, because the rebellion starts at like 11 or 12 years old. Because again, we're also allowed to get into pretty graphic scenes of like sexuality and stuff, right? Okay. Yeah. I mean, at a very young age, I discovered that I enjoyed my own company very much. I think the innuendo is not last year, right? And I mean, I'm talking like 10 or 11. I can remember the moment I discovered my first pubic hairs, and then it was within days of that the exploration began. And however young I was unironically watching Scooby-Doo and super into it. It was, a cartoon. And anyway, and so, yeah, 10 or 11 years old, became very aware of this sexual emergence. And that's not allowed in the church. Like masturbation is against the rules in Mormonism.
Wow.
Yeah. And not only that, you're also encouraged to narc on people that you think or know are masturbating. It's a wildly gross thing. And so that starts at like 11 or 12. The first time I remember thinking the church, like worrying the church isn't true, I would have been 14 or 15. And I had invited a friend from school who had been active Mormon when she was a child. Her parents got divorced, stopped going as much, invited her to come with. There's a fly about to land on my microphone. Sorry. It's just, okay, it's gone. And so she ends up coming to church with us. And because I'm having the experience of going like, I want this to go good. I want her, there's the flying. I want her to enjoy herself because I want her to keep coming back. And it was a fast and testimony meeting, which is the first Sunday of every month. And it's basically Mormon open mic. So instead of your normal sacrament meeting, as it's called, it's after everyone takes the sacrament, anybody can get up and bear their testimony of the church. And there was a woman who gave her testimony that told the most batshit insane story I'd ever heard. And it was funny because the timing of this was like, this isn't a usual thing to this level. But the summary of the story is she and her husband, and I think she had 2 kids, but it could have been more, it could have been less. Well, not really less. It was at least 2 kids, could have been more. Moved into a home. And she, after some amount of time, realized that somewhere living in a crawl space or in the attic or in the walls or somewhere, a homeless person was living and hiding from them. But that at times that homeless person was coming out and playing with her kids when they weren't around, or doing chores in the house. And so they figure out that this is the case, and they end up going around the house and basically yelling like, hey, you have to leave. You can't stay here. Like, whatever's going on, we're going to leave for a few hours. When we come back, you have to be gone because this just can't be. So they're running around the house. They're yelling this. And then she comes back home and all the chores are done and the house is like in pristine condition. The lawn, and they could just tell, they could sense that he had left. I remember they used him pronouns. But though I think I recall one of the childs described him as a man who was playing with them when they would leave the kids at home. And so, yeah, that's appropriate enough. But anyway, like that, and all the laundry was done. And she begins crying and talking about what a blessing this person is. And in my mind, I'm just thinking like, there's someone you don't know interacting with your kids and living in your house. That's not a and so she's like tearing up talking about this angel person, and I'm going, this is just bananas. This is full on nuts. And then I look around and I see a bunch of other people in the audience are also like wiping away tears to her story. And that's when I just went, oh, I hope this isn't all bullshit. And I remember I said, I don't remember for sure the rest of the sentence, but I remember that I said bullshit in my head because then I felt immediately guilty and started praying for forgiveness because I swore, I questioned the church. And that's the first memory I have of questioning it. But it wouldn't be for several more years in recognizing that my identity and the church are incompatible. For years, I just lived as a hypocrite. I was having sex and just telling people, never have sex and don't masturbate. Meanwhile, I'm going off and fucking. So I just lived in hypocrisy for a while. And then I hit this point of like, I'm living so dishonestly. It's not just within my religious life, but in my personal life. Like I've just learned to just lie and try and project the person that I want people to think I am. I'm living so dishonestly. It's hard to keep track of. My relationships are volatile. I just sort of hit this moment of it's time to like really question this stuff and start to observe this stuff. And at some point between 18 and 20 years old, I don't know the exact moment, but I was visiting my parents' house. I was staying in my old bedroom. And I just thought to myself, like, okay, I'm going to let myself consider that Joseph Smith made it all up, that this person who I have revered higher than any family member, higher than any like grandparent, authority, whatever, like the person who is supposed to be the man in Mormonism that you just love and respect and are so grateful for, second only to Jesus Christ, but that's only something you say. It's still Joseph you love more. That I was going to finally permit myself to go, I'm going to let myself consider that maybe he was a con man, that maybe he did this to get laid, to make money, to have power, to be dishonest, to be a hypocrite, to do all these things that I was doing in my own life. And when I finally gave myself permission on top of all the information I had learned or heard up to that point, that was the moment it fell away and I was done. I was like, oh, of course that's what happened. Like it
Wow.
fits so well. Instead of this giant bag of things that I have to reconcile, or as Mormons call it, the shelf that's loading up with things that's going to break. I don't have to reconcile single thing. Like reality through this lens is consistent, or I have a giant shelf or a bag of reconciliations. And so that's the story of questioning and leaving.
You know, I'm thinking back to the story of the mother who got tears in her eyes talking about this blessed, wonderful person who did all the chores. And I'm thinking, yeah, if I had 10 kids and I chased out some unknown person who was doing the chores, I'd be crying too. Like I would want someone there to help me with this huge load of work that I would have to do with so many kids around.
I think she just had the two, but yeah, no, I agree. I get what you're saying. It's just, it was, a family, and the way it was tears out of her eyes of a mystery vagrant.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. No one's going, people I know, I'm like, there'd have to be a level I would have to know someone before I'd leave my kids with them.
Exactly.
Let alone a person you have no idea who they are. And they're deceptive enough to live in the non-dignified parts of your house to live in.
Right.
Pass.
Did the young lady that you brought with you to church, to that service, did she have a flashback, end up coming back to Mormonism as the only way?
She did. I mean, not the only way. She never, in the time that I knew her, observed it like fully. Like she and I would continue to be friends for several years. And we'd go to church stuff together, but we'd always like we'd leave singles branch early and usually go get Arby's, which you're not supposed to do on Sundays. You're not supposed to shop or spend money or make anybody else work if you can avoid it in Mormonism. And so she, in the time I knew her, she never fully observed it. She was a little bit more sexually liberated than, you're really supposed to be as a Mormon woman. I'm not aware of any time while we were still friends that she would have been, able to get a temple recommend if she answered all the questions honestly.
Right.
But I think after our friendship sort of fell apart and she moved away and stuff, I think that she got married to a Mormon. So I'm not positive, but that was something that I think came across one of my like Facebook feeds or something at some point.
Well, I'm wondering how you're at 18 years old, then you're giving yourself permission to see the whole thing as just, a made up story.
Yeah.
At what point did you tell your parents or your siblings? Did they know that you were considering this, or that you were quite rebellious?
Yeah. So this is an illustration of the abusive family that never stopped being abusive. Until I cut them out, I guess. I didn't tell anybody until I was four. Well, okay. I definitely past my 21st birthday, nobody knew. And then my fiance at the time and I broke up somewhere between 21 and 22. And then around that period of time, one of my brothers came back from Kosovo where he was serving in the military. He'd also done a mission prior to that and then ends up going out with the military for this. And so now he's back and he's married, or he's not married. He's dating I think I got the Kosovo stuff. No, he comes back from his mission and starts dating a girl he goes to Kosovo later. Starts dating a girl who he met at college and college was just a town over, and ends up getting her pregnant the first time he ever has sex. And they're not married or anything, but now this girlfriend who I was in enough contact with him to know that relationship, there wasn't a plan for that relationship to keep going. But anyway, that he gets her pregnant, and they get married because of that. And then later he deploys to Kosovo, and there are some things that are going on with his spouse that was left behind. And this causes conflict between myself and them. And when he had gotten her pregnant, I came out to him as, hey, just so you know, I'm not going to judge you about the sex stuff. I'm not even really Mormon anymore. I don't even really believe in God. Like, basically trying to take this moment of like, everybody else in the family is shaming you. Everybody else in the family is like, oh, well, you're going to have to get back to repentance. And I'm sitting here going like, you didn't hurt anybody. If anything, the stupid thing you did was not buy condoms because dad made you afraid of them. Because that was something our dad always said, don't buy condoms because if you buy them, you'll use them. And it's like, you made a stupid decision. That's pretty much the extent. But as far as judging goes and stuff, I don't even think the church is true. I'd come out to him, move forward, all this conflicts happening between myself, him and his spouse. Not going to out family drama here on the live, but I was right. Anyway, but as a result of that conflict, he decides to out me to everybody else, basically out of a desire to see everybody mad at me, out of a desire to go like, oh, he might have witnessed these things that my spouse is saying aren't true or whatever else, but do you even trust him? He's not a Mormon anymore. And so he outs me as a weapon, basically. Took this moment of trust that I had in him and outs me. And so that is when I was outed. I was also in this time going through total identity crisis. I'm experimenting with drugs and all kinds of stuff are going on in my life because I've lost this core part of my personality and a realization that it's not true, but it was also incompatible with the rest of my personality. And so now I'm like just dramatically trying to find who I am and everything. And also I'm working a ton, I'm going to school a ton and stuff. And so that's where the drug stuff ended up coming in. And so it was a really tumultuous time in my life when the being outed happened. And it was a few years of really rough interactions with family. And then again, like trying to figure out who I am, where I am. It's a lot of like, well, fine, now that I'm out, that we're all going to argue about it. We're all going to fight about it. And of my siblings, I was the first one to leave. So it's literally like the whole family against me, except for like some cousins in the UK who had left. And we weren't ever all that close, though I did reach out and talk to them a couple times. So yeah, it sucked. I mean, it was a really finding out. I can honestly say that people finding out I was atheist was like a big, terrible time. People finding out I was queer years later, because I only came out a few years ago now, was like, yeah, fine. Okay. Like no one cares. That's whatever. Yeah.
Wow.
I had other members of my family who were out of the church, other members of the family who were out as queer. Yeah, it just didn't matter.
Wow. Okay. So then you were really the one to blaze that trail and break the religious chain. And it was just terribly painful because then you were having to contend with everybody else in the family. But now at this point, there are others who have rejected or left Mormonism, and then also even others who've come out as queer. So you are definitely in your family, not the only one who's gone through these things. You certainly were the first. So do you maintain contact with any of them?
Yeah, so the brother that I'm describing, I don't, that's a full no contact. There's another brother that I have full no contact because of abuses from childhood. It's interesting. My parents are like, it's kind of like mostly no contact. However, I will talk to one of my parents every now and then if something, like recently I called one of them just to be like, hey, what's our medical history on this? And when those conversations happen, if we end up starting to laugh about something or whatever, it's not like I cut off the conversation there. But so I would say like one parent, it's sort of like if they send me a message, I'll respond. Another, and then the other parent's more of I'll occasionally initiate a conversation, but it's mostly no contact. But yeah, no, I've got I even have family who's still in the church who I like. But there's now, and I definitely wore out the believer portion of my family during my coming out and all of my arguments and everything, to the point that by the time the next person came out, it was virtually like no conflict for them. And
wow.
Yeah. I mean, there was always the perception that I was a level of black sheep in the family. So it was almost like well, he was rebellious, he would date Catholics. You're not supposed to do that. He was this rebellious guy. Like, of course it was going to be that guy, though literally there's not a member of my family who, if they had left first, they wouldn't have come up with some reason why, of course, that's the first person to leave, because that's how confirmation bias and shit like that works. But yeah, it was definitely much easier for everyone. I feel like I had worn out the whole thing for everyone to leave after me. And it basically went, I left, I think 3 or 4 years later. One of my oldest brothers left, but not my oldest brother. Then the brother directly behind him in age left. And then one of my younger sisters left just a few years ago, back when I was still doing the show from Colorado. And so, yeah, it's just been, their times have been easier as far as the family goes, except for maybe the sister who realized that she just had to go completely no contact with our parents, which was tough for her because there are still siblings that she can only access through them that she'd like to still be able to talk to. But
right. And you mentioned that, so it's a large family, some that you're related to through birth and others through adoption. Yeah. And I wonder, I know this is very true in the evangelical world, that people are encouraged to grow the church through adoption. Is that similar in Mormon families as well?
Mormons, not only do they want you to have as big a family as possible, they don't want you to wait. And you can like listen to lots of conference talks and stuff of like, when you're ready and when the Lord is ready are different times, and stuff like that. I mean, ideally, you as a man at 18 years old, you go on a mission, you come back, and I think 18 or 19, as soon as you start passing that, 20, 21, 22, 23 to go, they start to look at you a little more like, are you even going? Do you even care about the commandments? And the cutoff is 26 years old. It would be earlier, except they do like to send recent converts out on missions. So they like to, like, if you're 23 years old, you become a member of the church. As soon as the 1 year period of time to get through the temple runs, they're going to try and send you out on a mission then too. But if you're in the church, they're wanting you to go as soon as possible. So at 18 now, it was 19 when I was a kid, but at 18 now, you're expected to, as soon as you can, go on a mission, come back 2 years later. So you're going to be 20 or 21 years old, and then marry one of the girls that are recently getting out of high school, basically.
Wow.
Because all the ones that the one you were dating when you left definitely broke up with you and married a return missionary, because that's what just happens. It's like a meme in the church almost, the Dear John letters.
Hey, so how did you, or how did you come to find out that there actually was some trauma involved for you around religion, or how did you kind of process the deconversion? Were there authors that you were listening to, or were you connecting with other people, recovering Mormons, ex-Mormons?
So to tell you the truth, I never really connected with an ex-Mormon network. I did consume. When I let go of religion, I've been much more interested in the ex-Mormon side of things in just the last few years than I ever was after. To me, it was, I left Mormonism. I existed for a while in this state of deism where I'm like, but that's like I'm probably a deist now. And then I'm just trying to, again, try and find some identity as I'm going through crisis. So this is, while my priorities at this point aren't conversation or debate or anything like that. It's, go to work, go to school, go out dancing at night, go party, and do drugs, drink, all of that sort of overloading yourself with all that stuff. So I wasn't in a state to, like, any of my arguments at that point were usually either directly with my family or in Facebook threads, just yelling at people. And then when I finally start to form some desire to participate in a conversation, it's mostly through watching debates by like Christopher Hitchens and Richard Dawkins and sort of the old crew of debaters. And so it'd be watching them debate, and then I'd get more interested in trying to have some of those. But even then, I mean, my career before YouTube, I was a photographer. I did commercial and portrait work. And so I thought my life was going a totally different direction. And then just sort of thought, like, there's a gap, there's a hole in YouTube where there's lots of atheist creators, but none of them communicate precisely the way I communicate. Also, right now, it's mostly a lot of cringy they call themselves anti-SJWs. It's a lot of like, yeah, religion's bullshit, but don't let the gays get too gay kind of stuff. That sort of stupid thing. There was a lot of that going on. And so I basically was like, I've already got most of the production equipment. Only thing I really need is a microphone because I'm already a photographer. So I've got cameras and lights and all the visual stuff. And that's when I just decided to start participating in the conversation from that end. I knew a little bit from running my own business that collaboration and marketing is the big thing. So I immediately reached out to an organization that had their own shows and platforms and started collabing with some people from there. And then it just grew from there. And I went down different avenues of what content I prioritized the most. Some of it now I look back and I'm like, meh, should have stuck more to this than this, but
Wow, hindsight's always 20/20. That's the truth.
Yeah. Different journeys, all that jazz.
So talk to us a little bit about the line and exactly what that is and what your vision is for it.
Yeah. So the line is the best thing I've done since becoming a YouTuber. And the line is basically, it's a series of call-in shows. So people call in and we have 5, right now we have 5 a week, but we're rapidly expanding and be adding a lot. But every show on the line and what will be by extension, the Line Network, because we're adding additional channels, is a call-in show. And so on Sundays, we do the Sunday show. It's very much like a Sunday call-in show, others that people have seen out there. It's always myself and Matt Dillahunty at the moment. That'll probably change in a year or so, as I will probably stop hosting that show at least every week. But Matt's going nowhere. Matt will be on that show until he dies, I think. And then Mondays we do a show called Skep Talk, usually where we bring in somebody who's an expert in some sort of field. So right now we've got like Shannon Q, who has degrees in psychology. We've got evolutionary biologist Forrest Valakai, also biologist Aaron Ra. I'm ashamed that I almost said Aaron there. A software engineer called Godless Engineer, and they basically they do more skepticism style, but also trying to revolve a little bit more around closer to the specific things they cover. And then on Tuesdays, right now, this last episode is actually the final episode that'll be on Tuesdays of Hostility, where we just sort of bring you some creator that we really like. We just did Seth Andrews this last Tuesday. However, starting next Tuesday, every Tuesday is going to be Dying Out Loud with Dave Warnock. It's literally a show about mortality, facing your mortality as a non-believer, finding purpose and hope in life and all of those things. Wednesdays, Matt has his own show. He usually brings in a different guest every week. And then Thursdays, we do the Transatlantic Call-In Show, where actual trans people take calls from allies or opponents to trans issues, about trans issues. And that's the best show on, like, it's the most important show on the line right now. And that's the one that I highly recommend people, if you're only going to pick one to go check out, the non-religion one is actually the one I like the most. And yeah, it's become this huge thing. It's growing rapidly. We're expanding rapidly. We're looking at not just doing shows, but also conventions. We're about to launch 2 new debate shows for it. We're launching 2 additional channels. Yeah, it's huge, and it's the best thing. Like I said, the best thing that I feel has come out of this journey into YouTube.
Wow, we just have no idea what direction we're going to end up going in life.
Yeah, definitely. There's some things that I think were predictable when I started YouTube, and then a lot of things where it's like, I guess more surreal than I never discounted the possibility I'd be collabing with all of these people, that many of them I had watched for years prior or anything like that. But there's still a lot of surrealness. Every now and then I'll just be on the Sunday show with Matt Dillahunty and be like, I used to watch this guy, and now I'm sitting across from him, and I pay him.
I know. I can't believe I'm talking with Jimmy Snow. I get that feeling.
To me, every time I know it's funny because there was a time when I had the most consumed atheist channel in the world. And I get it, why that's how people feel. I so don't feel that way about myself that every time somebody expresses it, I'm just like, lower your expectations. It's all downhill from here. My goodness. I'm truly proof that anybody can do it.
You're pretty down to earth. I will definitely definitely say that.
True. My ego is large and my aspirations are bigger. I don't know. I don't know what you mean.
Well, I just ran into Seth Andrews last weekend. We both were speaking at the Western Canadian Reason Conference, and Aaron Ra was there as well, and a few other people from the atheist community. And it was such a delight to actually get to meet in person people that I otherwise only know through social media and doing interviews with them. So I hope that you do start hosting some conventions or appearing at some conventions. And would you do the call-in shows while you were at the convention?
I have no idea, but right now I'm trying to remember what weekend we targeted. Whatever the weekend of the solar eclipse in Texas is next year, is when we're trying to do the first line con. It may be that was a stupid choice, even though it's a very exciting choice, because it turns out as you try to book event venues and everything like that, as well as hotels, everybody's coming to Austin. Some places people are going closer to, but we're within or close to the area of total blockage, total sun blackout, whatever it's called. Mm-hmm. It turns out that's actually it's not the best time to do something that, but anyway, we're going to see what we can pull off. But yeah, the first LineCon should be in 2024, probably in April, and hopefully the weekend of the eclipse.
Do you have, is there a favorite aspect to what you're doing right now? Because you're doing so many things, and some of them are you on the show talking to people, and some of them are more you behind the scenes producing. What's favorite for you? My
favorite thing in the world is that I'm building something that in a couple of years ago I can take my face off of. I don't particularly like being a public figure or a YouTuber, but I like the work. I like the impact. I like having influence. There are all these elements that I do like, but the actual, especially where it crosses over into parasocial nightmares. But yeah, the actual public figure part of it, I dare say I hate that part actually. And so I am very excited and I think a lot of people build stuff for the, I don't even know how to put it, because I don't want to shit on somebody else's, but a lot of times when you're building a platform, especially independently, it's all with the goal of building yourself up bigger and bigger and bigger. And I'm trying to build something actually other than myself up bigger and bigger and bigger with the hope that I can one day escape it. And when I do, there will be a group of people behind hosting these shows and stuff who are that there's nothing lost with me being gone, that all bases are covered. Right now, it is useful for me to host things, and there are people who watch when I host versus others. There's a period of time actually where I was the least popular host on the line when I was still mostly doing my other channel and not doing much on the line. And then it flipped when I decided to basically adapt and change back last August, September. I took it from a thing that I had hired people to basically run for me into basically taking total control of the channel again. And so there's a transition period time right now where we're going to build all of that, but I'm very excited for the thing that's going to outlive me, not just hopefully physically, also when I die or not, but outlive my presence being physically the face of.
Yeah, I feel like I can relate somewhat with the conference on religious trauma. And that's something that I started a few years ago. It hadn't been done before that. And what I see it becoming now on the Conference on Religious Trauma YouTube channel is a repository of resources around building up so many sessions and interviews from people who understand about religious trauma and religious trauma syndrome and what's involved in recovery, so that now people who are therapists, they can come to the channel and avail themselves of the resources there. And also people who aren't therapists, just people who are trying to figure out what the heck happened in their life and what can they do to try and help themselves. And that is very exciting to me, the idea that I'm building something bigger that will outlast me, far after I'm gone, hopefully, because people need help and people deserve help. And religion does suck. It really is a mind fuck. And so people, I want to see people getting help and rebuilding their identities, understanding who they are. Because you talked a lot about that, about how challenging it was when this was your whole identity. Our ideology merges with our identity. And then when we lose that, when that unravels, we really are lost. And there's such a time of existential free fall as we try and figure out, well, what does it mean if this whole thing I believed is actually not true? Who's in charge here? And then we have the exploration phase of, doing all the drugs and having all the orgies and whatever else we're doing as we figure out who we are and what our values are and what's important to us. And that can sure be an awkward phase when we're already well into adulthood. And maybe we even have a spouse or children as we're going through this time of rebuilding our identity, a secular identity. It's not easy. Yeah, definitely traumatic and a lot of work. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. Well, this has been so interesting and insightful getting to talk with you and finding out about your own experiences. Do you have anything that you would suggest for people who are just kind of starting out on this journey of their own deconstruction? Maybe they haven't even come out to their family yet as someone who no longer believes. Yeah, a few things. So I'm famous for saying, when you leave religion, shut the fuck up for 4 years. And what that advice actually is meant to be is, when you leave religion, prioritize listening and don't just go be angry on Facebook and make atheists look like assholes, because there's already plenty of atheist assholes to make us look like assholes. And so there's a lot of... when you have that hate and that anger at first, because you've been duped and fooled and you realize how much you've been manipulated, how much has been taken from you, it's very difficult to not externalize that on the only thing you have access to, because you don't have access to your clergy. You don't have access to, within Mormonism, you don't have access to general authorities. You don't have access to the apostles. You don't have access to the prophets. You certainly don't have access to the line of dead men who put you in this place. And so it's understandable that you're angry and you want to externalize that towards someone. And the people you do have access to are people in groups on Facebook. You can go find some Mormon to call an idiot or whatever. And that is something that you should resist, because you don't know anybody else's journey, even when it seems like a person is, there are times where I've said before, like, this person everybody's so mad at, I see as being in one of the final phases before deconstruction happens. Because right before you let it go, there's this death throw that happens where you're like, nope, I'm going harder than ever. I'm going to be as sensational as ever. And people love to pile on that person. I'm like, y'all don't realize, like, they're going hard and they're going to notice the people who they can then go talk to when this falls apart. The people who are like, I disagree with you, you're wrong, but I still see your humanity. And that's way, way more effective than, you fucking idiot, you don't even understand science, blah, 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 whatever shit. Not everybody has to follow the rule. 4 years just seems to be the average length that first initial... I have no problem with a person being an angry atheist for life, but when you're livid and hateful and you are an injured creature trying to tend to your wound, that's not the best time to engage. As far as, what was the other question? You had asked, what do you remember? There was advice to people who are leaving and maybe they haven't even come out to their own family yet. Gotcha. Yeah. Prioritize your safety first. So definitely assure that you are in a place that if you are financially dependent and you suspect you would lose that financial support, then lie. Like, that's the shitty thing. But yeah, if lying means surviving,
you're lying to people who are participating in your abuse. So, it's not great. And I hope you get to live a life completely without lies one day. But ensure your safety first. Make sure that you're taken care of. Make sure that you're going to be financially stable, that you're going to have a home and all that stuff. But once you are sure, or once you're at least pretty sure, or you're in that zone of like, I don't have everything planned, but it's not such a problem that if shit hit the fan, I couldn't figure it out. Then I would say come out as soon as you can. And it's going to suck, and it's going to be terrible for most people. It's probably going to be painful. People are going to treat you like shit. There are going to be consequences, but it's also going to be better than ever at some point after you do that, because you did that. The sense of getting to be yourself, not having to lie, not having to hide, not having to capitulate to your abusers is, you don't know, you've never met yourself until you do it. And so it's that's what I would recommend.
I like that. I think there's real wisdom there. And thanks for commenting also on the safety factor, because I feel like that's something that not enough people think about. If you're beholden financially to someone else, you really need to get your ducks in a row. And we know that for women who are in abusive marriages, the most dangerous time for them is when they tell their partner immediately after they tell the person that they want a divorce or that they are leaving. So working with women like that, we encourage them to develop a safety plan, have a safety plan in place. And this is similar. We want people to be thoughtful about how and when and whichever way they decide that they are going to tell their truth, that they no longer believe. And for the anger piece, anger is a legitimate part of the grieving process. And we are grieving multiple significant losses when we lose our religious faith, particularly if we were raised in it from childhood. It's our identity, our community, our worldview. And so we need to do some grief work around what we've lost, processing what we've lost. We have to acknowledge it so that we can mourn it properly. But we don't want to get stuck in kind of self-immolating, all-consuming anger. Anger that leads to change can be productive. And also we want to even explore, is there fear under that anger? Because fear is often the flip side of anger. So there's lots to think about when we leave religion and when we are dealing with anger. And I love the thought that you had about don't just be heaping that anger on other people. It's not necessarily the best or most helpful thing to do. And I think that also goes for people who have lost loved ones to the QAnon cult or down conspiracy theory rabbit holes. We are not getting them back by shaming them and calling them names and accusing them of being stupid. That is not going to go very far. That just gets defenses up. But instead to just remain kind and respectful to them and let them know we are here if they ever want to talk or they're having doubts about it. Yeah.
I even get pretty mad at the people who shit on quote unquote angry atheists, because it's such a broad thing to say when it's, if anything, the thing you need to work on is what makes you angry. When you allow, I guess, yourself, though it's a funny term because anger is not really something, it's not like something comes to the door and you either let it in or let it out, but you can still work on it. And I think a lot of that focuses on trying to develop empathy through the lens of what you've gone through. Because for me, I've stolen, I think it might even be a scripture, but I've changed a word in it. And the thing I try to live by is there, but for the grace of circumstance, go I. I have this core belief that everybody is capable of being everybody else. Everybody's capable of being Putin. Everybody's capable of being Donald Trump, and everybody's capable of being the opposite, the best versions of, Bernie Sanders, somebody who's like really great and seemingly enlightened and stuff. Everybody's capable of being everyone. The difference is circumstance. Some of the circumstances is extreme. You're probably not as capable of being a serial killer without a head injury, but a head injury is a circumstance. So it's through that lens that I think you can develop more of a patience for people where you can say like, look, I hate everything you're advocating for. The political movements you're participating in make me angry. But when it comes to talking to you, I'm going to treat you like a human. Now, if you start to get dishonest with me, I'm going to treat you like a human who's being dishonest. And so I'm not saying that definitely every conversation I have with people in opposition to what I believe, it's not rainbows and butterflies. I can get quite heated. But I do try to encourage people to make it about the ideology that you're opposed to and the change that you're wanting to make, which is why a lot of times when I'm arguing with people, I like to focus on the consequences of their belief even more than the belief itself, which is why we're also about to launch one of the new debate things. I don't know when this is coming out, so I don't know if the first time, technically I'm about to tell you something that I haven't announced anywhere else, but I don't know when the published date is, and I'm probably going to be announcing it like over the course of the next few days too. But we're about to launch a debate program it's either going to be called Duologues or something like that. Dual, like dialogues, but duologues. Anyway, and it's a town hall style debate where instead of it being like, here's a proposition, there's no morality without God or something like that, and then you have a person for and against. Instead, you have two people who have some core opposing belief. So maybe I'm an ex-Mormon sitting across from a Mormon or whatever. And just like our other shows, we're going to take calls, and it's going to focus more on what the answers to the same question is. So somebody's going to call in and say, my question for Jimmy is, how, if you don't believe in any God, could you possibly have any morality? And I'm going to answer that question if it's directed at me. And then my opponent gets to also answer the question from their opposing perspective, basically. And then maybe a minute each of rebuttals or response to each one. And then we move to the next question. Because I think the consequence of belief in a format of something like debate is way, way more effective at getting people to think about those beliefs than just here's objective morality, and here's like 6 philosophy papers that I'm citing that no one's going to fact check or read, and no one's even going to verify that my summary of them is correct, except for 2 niche YouTube channels that'll make 20 hours of content about it, and no one's going to watch. That shit, modern debate is so fucking garbage that we're going to try and do it now and it not suck because it's so bad.
That sounds so interesting. I will definitely want to tune in for that. I just love the whole idea behind it, and really wanting to focus on what if we believe this thing, here's what could potentially happen down the line. I think that's a really important thing, because a lot of religious people just don't think about it because they're not critically evaluating what they believe. Religion entered their life at a point when they were vulnerable, either as children or as an adult during a vulnerable time and circumstance. So that precludes being able to critically think about it and critically examine it.
Yeah.
Wow. You've got so much on the go, and you took time to chat with me today. And I thank you. And I hope that our paths cross again. It's been a real delight chatting with you.
I assure you, it was my pleasure. I know I said my ego is large earlier, but I wish more people would invite me on stuff. I genuinely, no one does. I don't know if they think I'm going to say no or what, but I like going on stuff. Where my ego is large, it's more of the yeah, that's right. I'm launching that awesome debate show because I'm that motherfucker. Yeah, that's right. I'm going to be, directing this next charity event because I'm the motherfucker who gets shit done. That's my. Meanwhile, it's also a miserable ego because it's the reason I'm that motherfucker is I have no personal life. I work 70 to 90 hours a week, and this consumes me. And I get in bed with just my dog. It's a two-sided thing. But I enjoy being, quote unquote, that motherfucker.
Well, now you're stuck because I will invite you back now that I know that you enjoy being invited on. So do that again.
I love it. I mean, to anybody who's listening going, oh, I'm going to invite him on. For the record, you have to, I'm not going to launch your podcast for you. Like it's got to, I'm going to look at where you're inviting me and see like, oh, there's an audience and this person does the work and they're not on the verge of quitting if their next 2 episodes don't go well or something. Cause that's just a waste of time. But other than that, yeah, I don't care. I'll go anywhere.
All right. Okay. Well, thanks, Jimmy, for joining me today. And thank you for tuning in to the Divorcing Religion podcast. You can find me at my website, divorcing-religion.com. I do work one-on-one with clients recovering from religious trauma, and I'd be so happy to hear from you. Thanks again, everyone. Take care.